Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of the Decade Jam podcast. Today, the podcast is hosted by myself, Avis, and James Earl Cox, just 404 it, the host of Decade Jam.
Hello,
Our
everyone.
keep forgetting that you say hello.
It's all good.
Our special guest today is Yyames. He is the creator of Discover My Body. Yyames, if you could go
Hi,
ahead and introduce yourself.
sure. My name is Yyames, and I make games. I started making games in 2016, or about that time. I do art and music and programming. I'm a solo dev, so I do everything.
Wow.
Yeah,
So right off the bat, that's pretty impressive. It sounds like your audio is good this time, by the way, James.
great. That's good to hear.
Um, so you handle all the facets of it pretty much, art, code, and audio.
Yeah. And I I try to There's sort of a trade-off where, like, by being a journalist, I'm not particularly great at any one of them, but
Mm-hmm.
um, it for games that I think that works for me, and that's like I don't know. I've seen people say, like, people end up in games, or like solo devs at least, because they like doing bits of everything alongside just like making video games, and that's definitely true for me. Like, I could never. I don't think if you asked me to commit to like just doing one like discipline, that I could do it. So, but
Mm-hmm.
so video games, it works well for that. So
I know for me, I do art and code, but I have no audio skills, no audio experience. And I would like to say that when I make games, being in control of both code and art is pretty big for me.
yeah,
I'm definitely on the boat with you there.
it is like that is something that I've noticed is because like there's more, I guess there's more like people who do code and art than there are people who do like code and music. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm sure there are some people, but like um primarily, like, that's sort of where I started, as like a music audio background, and then I slowly like expanded my skill set. So
Uh-huh. It seems like Mocha could probably back this up with the statistics from the server we have, but it seems like audio people are the rarest of the bunch, with art being a close second, and of course programmers being the most common. I don't know why programmers are so common when it comes to this kind of stuff. I guess it makes sense.
You mean for solo devs in particular, or you mean just people kind of
Even
jamming on
just
stuff?
like from the small jam communities, I'm like the small game dev communities that I'm part of, I've noticed that it's just overwhelmingly programmer. I think the reason for that is
Oh,
probably because if you want to make games and you're in these discords, you're probably someone who wants to have the control of everything, and the thing that gives you the most control is programming.
oh,
So
definitely.
I guess it makes sense. You can't make a game by yourself if you can't code. I think I screwed that up.
I know what you're saying.
If
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
only do art, you can't make a game. If you can only do code, you can make a game.
Hmm.
Anyways,
yeah,
oh, go ahead,
I
James.
think. Oh no, I think that's true. I mean, I'm not like, I'm not great at programming, but I still am sort of able to make the things that I want to make. If I had to, like, if you asked me to like program like a physics engine, like in like a 3D space, then I'd be like, I'd have to learn a lot of things. But
Uh huh.
for what I do, which is not not super technical, right? It's like a lot of
Mhm.
it is like, what I'm interested in is like drawing text to screen, and like a lot of the stuff I do is like point and click, so there are no even
Mhm.
2D physics involved. So like, but even that, like, was I had to figure out how to optimize my learning and even how to do that, right? Like,
Mhm.
Hmm.
coming from someone who couldn't program, I had to be like mindful of, okay, well, what do I really want to do? What do I really want to learn about? And then sort of specialize myself in those areas so that I can make what I wanted to make.
Yeah.
It makes a ton of sense. Something I was really interested in is earlier you mentioned how horror fit the things that you wanted to explore. Did you find that horror is like the most, I guess, applicable way to do that? Like, have you tested out the topic matters that you're interested in, like through other genres? Is this something that you enjoy making, or is this something you find that you're just very proficient at doing?
Um, if you if you asked me if I was like proficient at it or if I was like good at making horror before, like um I started to receive like more attention from people where they're like, wow, this really freaked me out, then I would have
Hmm.
said like, I'm just, I'm I can try, I don't think I have I'm particularly adept at it. I just think that so that answers that part of the question, I guess, right? Like
Yeah.
um but then the other part of the question, which is like, what how does it help, like the things that I'm interested in, how do they go well with the horror genre? Um I think uh really what I'm interested in a lot of times is like um very like broadly uh ex- like I don't know if I yeah, okay, well maybe this is a good thing to so I've been a lot of things in my life, but like one of the earlier things is like I was a student of philosophy. I studied philosophy, so like
Okay, that's
um
Huh.
pretty cool.
yeah, it is cool. And I'm glad I did it. Like basically I did it because I was like, oh, there's so many interesting things to learn, and it's like it goes with that whole vague broad generalist sense where it's like in philosophy it's a very broad discipline, and there are lots of different specializations. But if you're just like minoring, or excuse me, if you're just like a undergrad in philosophy, like you'll learn a lot of different things. But like so uh going with that, in everything that I make in video games wise, pretty much like there's always some sort of like, I don't know, some ideas that I want to explore, and a lot of them are like kind of strange or like dark, or like they make people uncomfortable a little bit. So like, but at the same time, I'm never like fully uh committed to like what I think some people are in the horror genre, where like the intention is to disturb you, and the intention is always like, yeah, I want to make this really like messed up, and I want to uh try and um scare people, which is not to say that that's like a bad thing, right? Like I
Mhm.
think if I were just to do like horror straight, it wouldn't be like, I don't think I'd be able to do it super well. But like what I've found in like the ideas that I'm interested in are like there's this element of like uncanniness. So like uh in Discover My Body, um a lot of the ideas there are like about human identity and like what it means to like sacrifice a human identity for like some sort of like happiness, and whether or not that happiness can be like achieved. And like it's presented in a horrific like manner, but at the same time like the person who is going through the experience is like very cognizant of what's going on, and like they're like, yeah, this is all good with me. And so it's like it's not, even though it is like presented specifically as like there's like the dread, like sort of like dread inducing music, and like
Hmm.
the visuals are creepy and stuff and he screams, but like it's more like, I don't know, it's like I want to like open up a conversation and like have people like be uh like I don't know, I feel like all art that is like uh conceptually interesting is like playing with ideas more than it is like forcing a moral. So
Mhm.
Hmm.
like I don't want to say like specifically like what this person is doing is bad, blah blah blah. Yeah,
Mhm.
but I've talked for a long time.
Oh no, perfect. That was
Um,
an amazing answer.
I have a couple things I wanted to add to that too.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so first off, from my playthrough of Discover My Body, what I really loved about it was because typically I avoid horror games like the plague. I'm not someone who likes to be scared. I don't like jump scares. I don't like that kind of thing. I'm barely getting my way through Half Life Alex. Um, that being said, I actually really liked Discover My Body. It was because the whole time it was so interesting, like learning about this crazy thing that's going on with this guy. Um, and then the second thing to that was we should probably give you a chance to explain the basic premise of Discover My Body for anyone here who hasn't played it or isn't familiar.
Hmm.
Sure. So, I'll start. I'll start. Well, would it be more interesting to start with my inspiration? Or all right. Anyway, so Discover My Body is a. It's a pretty short. Like,
Yeah,
can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you. Was it
Okay, I'm sorry.
like a 10-minute
My
game?
yeah, it's like I'm sorry, my audio device just showed up and never mind.
Sure,
Okay, so
no
yeah,
worries.
it's like takes like 10 minutes to play, and it's a pretty simple like game where you point your cursor and click and reveal different parts of a person's body. And at the beginning, the person is just kind of mostly for the most part normal. And as you go over their body, they're sort of nude on a table or on a surface in front of you. You're looking at them through like this medical scanning device, and you look at different parts of their body, scan over them, and as you reveal new and interesting features of their body, they will tell you what they mean. So, like in this instance, it's a man who, or yeah, it's a person who is feels very lonely in their life, and wants to inject themselves with a fungal hive mind so that they can achieve eternal happiness. So
Yep.
that's a cool thing.
Yep.
And I forgot to add the other part of the game. You can like look at different layers of their body. So like you have a topical layer, and then you have a skeletal layer, and a nervous layer. And as they become part of the hive mind, uh they they change in different ways. So yeah, that's and it's 10 minutes. It's pretty short. But and I made it over a weekend, just sort of on a whim. And
That's
Really,
yeah,
the
amazing.
whole game was made in one weekend?
really, it was a really like it was a really a push because at the time I was like working. At the time I was working a full time job, and I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna make games anymore if I have to like um if I have to do like I found a way, which is just you have to work your ass off and like treat it like a second job.
Yep.
But um yeah, yeah. Anyway, the inspiration for it, by the way, came from a CD-ROM game that was made back when they made CD-ROM games, that me and my friend, a childhood friend, used to play called Discover the World 2.
Hmm.
And in that game, you it's like it's very if you played it, you'd be like, wow, this is like I can see the inspiration, but like you're like you're a ship like sailing out of like a Spanish port in like the 1400s or something. You go
Uh-huh.
around the world and reveal like tiles on the map,
Oh, okay.
and so you just sort of very slowly like go out and like look at things. And
Mhm.
I had made at some point I was talking with my friend about that game that we played, and I was like, what if it was Discover My Body instead of Discover the World? And it
That's
was
so
like
good.
and it was
It's
like and originally it was like a completely comedic purpose, right? Because it was like, yeah, it's like you're an eyeball and you're looking at like a nude man, and he's like, I think also at the time that I was making it, I I was like the job that I was working was like very like physically intensive, and I had just had a birthday, so I was like, oh, I'm getting so old. So originally what the premise was you're going to look at this person as they like rapidly age and then turn into a skeleton. But
mm.
Oh,
so that would have been a different take, but like I don't know, and I don't know how I got onto the what I did eventually, but it just
Uh-huh.
sort of yeah, yeah, I just somehow I iterated enough on that idea where I was like, okay, well, what if he was a fungi person? So yeah.
Mhm. So, going off of that, a couple things that I kind of noticed. First off, if you don't mind answering, your guy, so probably not. How old are you?
I'm 28.
Oh, okay. You're not too old.
Yeah. But yes, that's true. But
you're
like
too
considering
old.
like the age, it's like I feel like at the time I was like, oh, I'm not in my early 20s anymore, you know. It's always like a
Mhm.
relative thing, I guess.
I mean,
Um
I feel like after the age of about 21, the rest of your life you're like, "Oh shit, I'm getting old."
yeah, yeah, definitely.
And then following that up, what do you do for money? What do you work?
So I that was a contract position, and now I have another, or the job that I was working at the time, it was a contract position as like a shipping receiving facility. And so once the coronavirus happened, I had to leave that place because all the shipping
Mm,
receiving. And yeah, but
Hmm.
so now I'm doing like a remote thing, doing like a remote temp job. um uh yeah,
It
uh
makes sense. You got
but
to do what you
like
got to do now.
yeah, but like yeah, it does offer me like more, it offers me more time to like pursue games definitely. But like that's definitely a thing, is like working a full-time job and also doing games is
Hmm.
can be, you can like definitely burn the candle on both ends.
yeah,
One
I
hundred percent.
actually have personal experience with that. I used to be a pizza boy by night and a game developer by day, and I would work like 4 days a week, 6 hour shifts. I had tons of time. I could play games, I could make games, I could do whatever I wanted. It was awesome. And now I work full time in IT.
Yeah, that sounds like it rocks, honestly. Being a that's you,
I
yeah.
totally miss my time as a pizza boy. But I make a lot more money now, and I
Yeah,
have a really nice place now, so I can't really complain. But
yeah.
finding time to make
No.
games is a lot harder than it used to be.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess to jump back a little bit, something I absolutely love is the fact that you took inspiration. I'm assuming Discover the World was in no way a horror game.
No, it was like an educational game. And that's
Oh,
Uh-huh.
like
it's
the
so
other,
good.
so like that's the other side of the Discover My Body, is like I think in some way I did want to make it like educational, like um
Like in the
and
process of
I've,
learning about this horrible fungus, you're like also learning about human anatomy,
or not even that, like maybe it's like, I don't know, it's like education, it's like educational for a fictional topic, I guess. Yes.
like faux
uh
educational.
yeah, yeah. It is like it's an interesting thing because it works for me, especially because like I'm not super into like like again, like just from a technical perspective, a lot of the games I make are very like, they're they're kind of simple. And if you're like doing things with lots of story and lots of text, but you're doing it in a way that can be more interactive than like say like a visual novel, or
Uh-huh.
something like a Twine game, then like that's I think that's cool. I mean those are the kind of games that I'm interested in, so I think I make them.
I mean, it really interests me how you're able to do so much with so little as far as the gameplay goes. I
Hmm.
mean, like if you compare your game to like a platformer or like a shooter game or any like pretty much any other kind of game, it's a lot less interactive, but I would say the density of like enjoyment and the experience, like how interesting it is pretty much the same. Like it really impresses me.
Thank you. Yeah, I think like is for more like mechanic intensive games. And I'm working on some of them, but what has always been important to me in a game has been atmosphere, and how you achieve that atmosphere.
Uh huh.
So like a lot of my, there like I like all sorts of games that can do this same sort of thing, but like I really, it's sort of like the idea of like people always talk about in games where it's like the mechanics has to be, or the mechanics of a game have to match the story or whatever. Where,
Hmm.
and I don't think that's necessarily super true like 100% of the time, but I definitely
Sometimes.
think there is yeah, I think it's more important to be like uh it's more like, what is, how can you make the how can you tell your story in a way that is evocative, and like or like how can you use the mechanics in a game to uh tell the story in a way that either no one has done before or that really suits your game super well.
Uh
So
huh.
like if you're just learning about like a if you're learning about this world where people are sad, and you're like they're like they want to become fungus people, for all sorts of different reasons. I think that if you use like an educational type of game to do that, then it'll be uh, it'll be like a more interesting experience if you're like if you're like shooting them or whatever.
Totally.
Because I mean, on just on like the face of it, it's like um, I don't want to condemn like a
Fungus
person who wants
people.
to become a fungus people. Yes, exactly. So
Perfect.
like I'd rather have you just like sort of observe and make your own decisions.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I'm definitely in the camp that's like the mechanics should suit not necessarily the story, but it's the message that you want to convey with the game. But you make me kind of reconsider that. Like I'm wondering now if my point of view is more of yeah, I don't know. It's prescriptive rather than descriptive. It's like if it worked, then I can say, oh yes, it did what I thought it should do. And if the game doesn't work, then it's easy to say, oh yeah, well, it obviously didn't obey this rule. Whereas, maybe a game could be better suited to mechanics heavy genre, but because you tell it in this kind of novel, different interface, it gets way more traction than it would otherwise. Like, how would you ever know if no one's ever going to interact with it, even if it is, potentially less evocative, but more suited to the story? It's something I've never thought about.
Hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, I just had that little side tangent.
Yeah,
But
no,
yeah,
totally agree.
I definitely think that your game, the simple mechanics work perfectly, and I say simple in the most praising way. I absolutely love games that have very little interaction. I think if your game has too many interactions, then it just takes away from any kind of deeper understanding or meaning that the game could have, unless the game is meant to be overwhelming. So I absolutely loved how easy it was to jump into play wise.
I mean, it really surprised me how unique and innovative it is. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's other games like it out there, but like from my perspective, I don't know if I've ever seen anything like Discover My Body at all.
Oh yeah, even the
Um,
screen ratio and like the little static noise, like that's my
hmm
absolute favorite around the
like the
edges.
glitch shader effect, that was
Yeah,
pretty
like that's
cool.
so good.
And I remember the first time you posted it in the showcase channel in the Discord here, and I saw it, and I saw like this half nude man in this weird art style, and I'm like, oh boy, am I gonna have to remove this? And I clicked on it, I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty good.
Sorry, I dropped out there. Am I back?
You
Oh
are
no.
back.
Yeah, you're good.
Could you
We
hear us?
were
Okay.
we were literally just singing your praises. Anyone in
Oh,
chat can vouch for us.
oh, great. I have to go back and listen now. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
It'll be on YouTube probably tonight.
yeah. Um, good. But yeah. We're talking, I think, about. Well, you guys can go ahead. Yeah,
Sure.
because I missed out. So.
Oh yeah. I guess very briefly what I was saying was that I used to be kind of into thinking that the mechanics of a game should always suit whatever the narrative is. And you made me kind of reconsider that in the idea that there might be a game that you make where the game might be better suited for overwhelming mechanics, but instead, if the game isn't evocative and nobody plays it, it might be better if you use mechanics for the game that don't necessarily fit the story the best, but will actually garner more attention to it.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean that's I guess what I meant by evocative, I was like to me, a lot of what especially video games can accomplish, like I was saying about like atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
like um if you can like it's like if you have a game and like yes, you're the one way you interact with the game is like the mechanics, or like honestly the most important way you interact with the game is the mechanics, right? Which makes
Mm-hmm.
it what make video games like their own sort of art form. But like
Mhm.
then you have all like this the you have like the writing, and you have the sound, and you have the art. But um the one sort of point of attention that the person who's playing the game has the most on what they're doing is what they're doing mechanically. So like I guess it's like the way that you can make something evocative is you have to always make it evocative of what you're trying to do. So
Mhm.
like again, like if you have a game about like, or if you have Discover My Body, where it's like you are about, it's about learning what this fungus is and about observing, right? You're an eyeball, you're going around, you're looking at things, and you're just sort of watching it happen. Then you shouldn't have. Then the observing should be just that, like observing, right? Like
Hmm.
that's the one mechanic of the game is you just look at things and you reveal them. So I don't know, maybe that doesn't make any more sense, but like,
Oh no, it totally
uh,
does.
yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
I obviously think that the mechanics in your game very much fit the storyline, and I think it beautifully lets the player do exactly what they need to do. You didn't overwhelm them. Like one of the things I find the coolest about certain games is when they resist putting in mechanics that would just be overwhelming. It's like, why do you need this?
yeah,
So that's what I absolutely love about what you did. Um, Kind of like how you're saying that, like this is an interesting way to tell this story because you could have gone towards, more of a Last of Us first person shooter. And it's like, you know what? Like, no, what if you're talking to them and they're actually enjoying this process?
yeah, and it's like a part of it too is like, I mean, I know a lot of people or some people might like resist that, but like the more I play games and uh the more I like experience life and get older as an old 28-year-old, I'm like, well, like I am more interested in games that mechanically or that tell a story more than they do revel in their mechanics, or
Hmm.
like sort of activate the pleasure of doing something and doing it well, like more like the Ludo, or the was it the Ludo, no, I'm sorry, more like the more like play rather than like competition. So like
Hmm.
Hmm.
uh if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's more like a. Were you looking for a ludology?
that might have been it. It's like they're like the split, like I was trying to go with like what's the academic split where it's like the
It's like
ludic
a.
versus the
I always knew it as a
s-
narratology versus ludology.
that might be it. Okay, so I might be with more with the narratology people.
Yeah, I'm
But
100% on that side. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
you're in good
um
company.
but like at the same time I realized like how important the ludic side of that is, right, for
Mhm.
making games an important like storytelling tool.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I didn't mean to bamboozle you earlier with that question about what was it, like if you explored other genres or how you landed on horror. I was just really interested, kind of like the dichotomy you pointed out with the person enjoying it, because I didn't know that it was inspired by a kind of educational ship game, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah.
But I definitely kind of got the sense where it was like this isn't your typical horror game. Like I wondered if before you landed on it being horror, if you had considered a different genre. So
Oh,
I was just kind of curious about that. But
yeah,
we we do have another question that I kind of wondered.
sure.
You mentioned that you studied philosophy. Do you have any other hobbies that kind of pour into your games?
Yeah, so um I guess when I was talking about being like an audio and music person,
Hmm.
so that's was like my primary hobby
Oh, okay.
before I started like doing games, was just like I'm going to be a musician, and that like is still a dream, but I'm
Right.
sort of like realizing like even when I was making music, like people were like, this sounds like it could really be in a video game somewhere. I was like, okay, well, maybe I won't be on a stage somewhere, but I can do other things.
Yeah.
And it
Hmm.
served me well, right? Like I really do enjoy like working with sound design in games, and like especially with like uh games like horror. The horror genre is a great genre for sound design because there's a lot of like fun ways you can like make people sort of on a little bit on edge with like different sounds. So
Hmm. For sure. I definitely envy that about you. I wish I had audio and sound skills and
Oh,
background.
the dream.
I always have to find someone else to do it for me.
Hmm.
And not that other people are bad or anything, it's just it can be a pain to find someone reliable and good to help me with my game.
yeah, I've so that's like part of the reason why I am like a solo dev is like one, I don't like I just heard so many stories about like like collaborate. It's always like a collaboration, right? It can
Yup.
be really great. It can bring out the best in people, and it can like make the best art a lot of the times. But like sometimes when it doesn't work, and yeah, when
Yeah,
it
I
doesn't work, it
mean,
doesn't work.
there's a lot of ways that working with other people on games can go wrong. Oh man.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
like,
kind of yeah, go for it.
I mean, it's a couple examples is you're working with somebody, but they're whatever their facet of it is just is not up to the bar of what you expect quality wise, and it's like, oh, how do I dump this person? Do I make it work?
Hmm.
Or like the like I've done a lot of game jams, and like towards the last 3 days of those game jams, nobody likes anybody on the team. Because like I'll do like a 2 week game jam, and by like the last when it gets to the last 3 days, I mean me and Josh we're not friends.
Hmm.
It's like oh, but
I get
I
that.
mean some of my best work has been group projects, like group ventures I should say. But what am I trying to get to here? Working alone is like the ultimate freedom in that. Like you can just do what you want. You don't have to have meetings. You don't have to run it by somebody. There's no arguments.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a
So
double-edged sword, but yeah.
have you done any collaborative projects, or did you just kind of jump in? You're like, I just kind of want to make these things for myself, and if somebody likes them, great. Or how did you get kind of how'd you end up doing solo stuff?
Um. It. Yeah. It was part of it was just like I didn't really know anyone at the time who was interested in making games, so I just kind of set out on my own. And
Okay.
I've made a couple of graphics for some small games,
Mm.
uh, but um, I think almost like 95% of my work has just been solo stuff. So
Gotcha.
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, one thing that just popped into my head that I'd love to ask you about is have there been any like tutorials or people or kind of that kind of thing that have inspired you making games? Like for example, for me, I found a video by a guy named Tom Francis. He made a tutorial series on how to use GameMaker, and that really inspired me and helped me get into it. So I was wondering if you had anything kind of similar to that or anything.
Um. I guess like pure inspiration. I think when I decided that I wanted to make games, was when I played Space Funeral, which is a game by the Catamites. It's an indie game. I think his name is the Catamites. It might be the Comites or something like that. But
I'm
anyway,
pretty sure it's the Catamites. Yeah.
okay. So anyway, yeah, Space Funeral was like the first time I played a game, and I was like, wow, you can just do anything with a game. You don't need to like, and that's like I mean that in like a good way because I really love
Hmm.
Hmm.
Space Funeral, but at the same time, it's like such like I was like wow, I was like really blown away, and then when I learned it was just one person, I was like I really want to do this. But so that's not necessarily a tutorial, but that's a
Uh
game I
huh.
was inspired by.
For sure.
But on tutorials though, like as I was saying, like about if you want to make games, and especially if you're like a solo person who has um their own way to make games and makes games largely like that I make games that I want to like see in the world
Mhm.
and play and stuff. So like what's really like worked for me is again like cultivating your own sort of tool set where you are able to make the things that you want to make instead of like going too broad and just uh like getting like a full program. Like it's great if you have like a full programming education, but that's kind of
Oh.
like the way I tried to like approach it the first time when I like made games, and I like bounced off a couple times. I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn Python so I can do stuff in Godot, and like that's what I started with. I think I started with Godot, and then I moved to a bunch of other things, and I finally arrived at Game Maker Studio 2. But like the way I was approaching it like really broadly, where I was like, I
What is
need to
game
have
maker
these
thing?
really set foundations,
Hmm.
and I what I when but what actually started working for me when I started like actually making games, there was like that there was actually like positive feedback where I was seeing things being made instead of like having a bunch of fail like half made projects. And what
Mhm.
allowed me to do that was like again, like cultivating this very specific, like, okay, well, I want to do text boxes. How do I do text boxes? I want to do this type of shader. How do I do this type of shader? I want to do
That's
pixel
exactly
art.
how I learned.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's like it's so it's such a good way to learn, and it's such a good I mean,
Well,
especially well, yeah, okay. I was getting it. It might not be a good way to if you want like it's like I don't know. I don't think I could get like if like obviously I'm not trying to get into like the video game industry at this
uh-huh.
point, right? Because like all my skills are like again they're for me and they're for the games that I want to make.
Hmm.
So like not necessarily and if other people enjoy those games, then that's great too. But like yeah, there is like a drawback to that. But if I'm pretty happy with like the sort of the skill set that I have and yeah.
Yeah.
Um yeah.
Yeah, I definitely personally a lot of those points that you just made kind of landed with me quite a bit because I'm pretty much in the same boat as you. I just make games kind of as a hobby at this point, and yeah,
Yeah.
kind of lost what I was
I
saying there. Sorry. I do have another question I'd like to ask you too, but go ahead.
oh no, go on.
So you said you kind of bounced around between game engines, and I also use GameMaker, but I started with it. So I was wondering what was your journey between game engines, and why did you end up with GameMaker?
It might I've thought about this a lot. Like it might not have been that Game Maker is like super duper I mean like compared to a
You
lot of things
started
it's
10
very
minutes
easy to
late.
make games with. But like it may have just been I had tried so many times with so many different other things that it finally like stuck where I was like, okay, well, oh, that's what this means and like all like sort of I'd learned all these things from failing so many times and again it finally clicked where with game
Mm-hmm.
maker but yeah uh but also the other part of that is game maker has like such a great history of documentation or like everything
Yeah.
you like want to know is like you can google it and like there'll be somewhere on the forums that was like posted in 2008 and it'll probably still work.
Somebody was
um
struggling through it for an entire afternoon, and then you could just kind of find it. And
yeah,
I know
yeah.
there was one meme that was posted in the memes channel on the Decade Jam server, and it was it was like I think maybe someone shared like a Twitter thing, but it was someone had like their game IDE open or whatever IDE, and they were making their game, and they were into this issue, and then they like pressed compile, and it said like compile succeeded, and then it played like I wish I knew what the music was. I don't know what any of the orchestral music's called, but it was playing some music. He's going through and closing about 200 Stack Overflow tabs, and I just thought that was hilarious because it's so relatable.
Yeah.
That's so good.
That afternoon of debugging.
Yeah. Oh, so what is the origin of your username? I don't think we already asked that. Sorry, I know we kind of did a deep dive early on into all these other questions. Oh, also, I'm 29, so don't. The age thing is okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not the oldest man here. I'm
Yeah,
definitely the youngest. Only a
not the
mere
oldest one in
21 years
chat.
old.
Yeah. It's okay.
um
We're all doing quarantine together.
yeah. So my name came from a friend who I'm not sure where he gets it. He just started doing it one day and then it sort of stuck. Like my friend who is also like friends with my little brother and at some point my little brother called me the same name that he did and I was like, okay, well, there it is. Like
Uh
that's like
huh.
I've never had a nickname, but this is as close as I'm gonna get, so I might as well use it. We're like
Yyames.
whatever. Yeah.
If you
That's
don't mind
good.
me asking, what country are you from?
I'm from the US.
Okay, yeah. I believe both. I think we all are then. James, you're American, right?
Yeah.
This is the part where James said it gets really offended and tells me he's British.
Yeah.
You never
No.
know on Discord. I
It's crazy.
I think I always want to ask people, but at the same time, like I don't want to be like rude.
For me, the
Like
big thing is, you can't tell someone's gender, so you don't know what pronouns to use.
Oh
So it's like
yeah.
you have to sheepishly avoid it if their pictures are like
Yeah.
not clear. So it's like, hello, they were just here. Yep.
So how I guess going back to the nickname thing, how long did that was that like a long time ago, or is that like kind of like a once you started getting a username for yourself? Or
So that was like my musical artist name.
Okay.
And yeah, so like what I went by, and then I was like, okay, well,
Just keep using it, hey?
uh, yeah, it's a good enough name. I'm not great with names, so or at least like
Yeah.
naming myself. So yeah.
You're the only Yyames I know.
it's so good. It's so simple. It's perfect.
Yeah, for sure.
They said it couldn't be done. Somehow you pulled it off.
All right, so we've talked about Discover My Body, but we haven't talked about Discover My Bodies. I think that's what it's called. There's a Discover
Uh,
Our Bodies.
Discover Our Bodies.
Discover Our Bodies. So.
Yeah, you're thinking of the third in the trilogy. That's Discover My Bodies.
So, what can you tell us about Discover Our Bodies?
So it's gonna be like Discover My Body, except bigger and better. No. It's gonna be um it's gonna tell lots of different stories similar to Discover My Body, but
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be in the same like universe. And it's gonna use similar methods of like examination of a subject, but it's gonna be different each time, different for each subject. So there's going to be multiple subjects instead of just one, and there's going to be all sorts of tools
James,
that you
I'll
can
be right
use.
back. Cover this for me.
Sure. No, there's going to be all
I'll
sorts
be
of
right
tools
back. Sorry.
you can use.
How was that?
And like I just implemented like a system for doing endoscopy. So there's like upper and lower endoscopy. So searching through someone's intestines. And there's going to be multiple different layers for like each transformation. So instead of just like the topical and the skeletal and the nervous system, there'll be like a digestive system and like a respiratory system, depending on what subject it is. It's going to sort of change contextually for each one. But yeah,
That's really cool.
I'm working on the demo, and I hope to have it done pretty soon. I've been posting devlogs. I did one earlier this morning. Actually, I haven't posted that on the. I should post that on the Decade Jam Discord. But and you can just sort of see my progress. Yeah. And I'm also I'm making a couple of other games, but that's sort of at the forefront of what I'm actively documenting like my development on. So yeah.
Weird.
That's awesome. How do you? I'm sorry.
No, go on. Yeah.
I was gonna ask because I was looking through your Twitter and I
Sorry,
definitely saw the endoscopy screenshot, which looks amazing. But I was really curious if like how do you manage jumping between your different projects? Do you just kind of like finish up one at a time? Because Lord knows I have folders full of like half-baked projects that I just never got back to.
Yeah, I mean, I might end up with those. I mean, I have some of those right now, right? Like I'm trying. It's like a balancing act. But one thing that's helped me manage multiple projects is like definitely scoping them in a way that I think is responsible. So like I have one demo for a game called Lips Like Velum, or excuse me, not Lips Like Velum. Lips Like it's a like an expanded demo on the game Lips Like Velum, which is a game that I made like in 2018, I think. I decided to come back to. Yeah. And it's like it's bigger. It is like a bigger and better Lips Like Velum, but and that like I know what I want to do with that one, where it's like a project that is also going to be sort of like a exploratory demo, and I might make something bigger for it if all goes well. And then I have one other smaller project where I know it's going to be a small project, so I know like if I can work on it in times when I don't feel like digging into a really big project, or like working on, if I feel like making like substantial progress, it's all about like measuring like expectations for like how much work you think you can do and what you can handle. And it also
Gotcha.
helps. Yeah, it also helps like it's helped me had to have like a main focus to work on, which is the Discover Our Bodies demo. So like uh I know that I should be putting the most time into that, and then if I have time left over, I can put it into other things at the time, at this moment. So
I'm just looking into Lips Like Velum now. I'll go ahead and I'll post it in the chat for anyone who's curious about it. And it'll be in the video description too for our viewers, I guess would be the word.
cool.
And
Yeah.
it looks pretty cool. I've never, I really should have done my homework and looked through your portfolio games and see if there are any other ones I wanted to talk about, like I did with James.
Yeah. Ooh, actually, yeah. What's your favorite game that you've made?
Oh, that's a good one.
uh Probably Discover My Body. But the second one, there's a it's called uh Via Negativa, which is also on my itch.io page, I think. And that's like, that was when I was like I really didn't know what I was doing. Where I was like, okay, if I can draw one text box to the screen, then I'll be happy. So it's like a very very like it's not fun, but it is like, again, I think I made it like atmospheric, which like I which I like. So like in that game, you are a I think that like the start of it is like you're a traveler in a long, like a foreign land, and it sort of has like a mythical feel. And there's only one button in the game, which is W, which where you walk forward, and there's like a scrolling like screen where you're like walking along this path.
Oh, that's so perfect.
And you meet people, and they say like, oh, God is in the road up ahead. He ate my eyes. And what you do in the game is eventually you do meet God, and then you give him either your like heart or your lungs or your eyes or your breath, or like I'm trying to recall it exactly, but depending on what you give first, like it will alter the game experience. So like if you give your eyes, then you lose, because you have to you have to be able to like see to walk down the path. But if you give him your legs, then you move at like half the speed you did before. So it's like it's really like it's a strange thing. And again, it's like not super fun, but that's like probably one of the, besides Discover My Body, that's like my favorite game that I've made.
The comments on that one are pretty glowing too, I noticed.
For the people who played it, it's definitely not like getting people see. I think I built it as like a religious comedy horror game, where like, so it was partially like about like, I think I made it when I was like really thinking, when I was like feeling, I don't know, I was either like super depressed or feeling like super like, what's the point of this world? It's something very, but at the same time, it's like, it's a comedy game, like in that the people who come up to you and say things like, God took my eyes, like, I don't know, to me, like there's something, it's to me like horror, I guess, always has like some like, again, like that uncanny element where it can be interpreted as something that's completely ridiculous, but at the same time it can be scary, or it can move you to feel scared.
Man.
But yeah, you get some pretty cool. You get some pretty cool games out there. Something that I've noticed is, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
So something that I've noticed between all of your games is they have this really unique art style to them.
Yeah, and I think like I always try to make something that is visually appealing, and at the same time like something that I can accomplish on. So like I use pixel art mainly, but
I mean, looking at your games, you wouldn't even be able to tell really, because of the way that you do them. It doesn't like have that pixel art kind of feel to it in like the best way.
Yeah. So like that's, I guess, like I like to make more like, I call it like traditional pixel art, where it's like you don't break the rules of pixel art. You use like anti-aliasing responsibly and stuff like that. But like I do feel like for making games, if you like break enough rules, you can make something your own. And make it look reasonably good too. Because like I'm always shooting for something with art, because I feel like art for me it's very like a utilitarian purpose, where it's like, again, it has to like be something that's evocative of the atmosphere that I want to create. So um and depending on what game you're playing, the atmosphere is going to be different. So I it's always just, it doesn't have to be really like great looking, but it does have to fit with what I want to do with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there? I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it, and no worries if you don't, because obviously we didn't say, hey, prepare something. But I was really curious. Is there anything that you find really fascinating that you'd like to chat about or just share? Could be game related, could be totally ungame related, maybe something totally off topic, a movie, something
Mhm.
you've been doing recently. Heck, maybe just something you've been thinking about. Expand my mind,
Uh
please.
I mean, we're totally putting you on the spot here, so
Yeah, such
yeah.
no
feel free to
pressure.
bounce it back. No worries.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get okay. So one thing I wanted to bring up, like, if because I was when I read the topic of the podcast was going to be like what makes a good horror game,
Mhm.
and I have gotten like a couple questions specifically about that, where it's like people have been saying like, what, like, how did you make this scary, like where did you get your inspiration from,
Hmm.
and yeah, so I think I'll try to speak more a little bit more on that, just because like I
Yeah.
think it's like that is the one thing that I have prepared. So yeah,
Mhm.
um,
Perfect.
like I think with horror, and I mentioned this a little bit before, but it has, for me, interesting horror has always been about never playing it straight, where it's just like and that's kind of obvious, like you're like up front, right? Where it's like a lot of people will say like, oh, I don't like jump scares in my horror, and like that's like a fairly common notion. But some people do like jump scares in horror, and that's fine too. That's like a different kind of horror.
Uh
But
huh.
like what I think makes for the best scary things, often, again, it's like about ambiguity and about uh the uncanny, where like if you can if you can make something that is strange but not strange enough to place it into the category of horror directly, where you're like, oh shit, that's scary, but more it's like about like you don't know how to grapple with it at first, um, then I think that is a way to make interesting horror and make something that sticks with people. Because like, again, with like Discover My Body, it's like, okay, you have a fungus that is like does this thing, and or it's like it can infect people and sort of psychically uh change them, right?
Uh
Change
huh.
their mind and
I
make
got
them
it.
go into like this different headspace. Uh, excuse me.
No worries.
Um, so yeah, but then you have like an added element where it's like a person who is like, I really want this,
Hmm.
like, and I think this is better than being like living as a person, and I think this is better than um the life that I had before, and it's going to be better than any life that I could have had as a human being in the first place. So
Yeah.
like it's
Something
like it's
that
like
sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
Something that I noticed, like some of my thoughts from Discover My Body were, it was like this normal guy, well, this outwardly normal guy, who was like totally down to go through this, to us, horrible appearing experience. I think that was something that fed into the scariness part of it for me a lot, because it was just like, why is this guy so enthusiastic about this? This is terrible. And like, um kind of like going through and like exploring his body as it like is scientifically explained what is happening to him as he tells you, nonetheless. I
Hmm.
mean, a lot of that kind of was like, it was like horror, but not in like a way that it was like trying to be scary. You know what I mean? Like it was kind of just like a natural horror experience, which I really enjoyed it for that reason.
Yeah, and I think um at the like the same time, like there's also like there's some humor in the game, right? And Discover My Bodies, like he like the guy cracks some jokes, um and some people have told me like this is funny and scary at the same time, and I
Uh-huh.
was like, okay, great, yes, that I wanted to that's sort of like, again, it's like this ambiguity that you want to shoot for, like what does it mean? Is it good? Is it bad? That generally that's going to
Mhm.
be more scary than just like is it's bad. Like
Hmm.
the things that are like not so we have to sort of, if we can't like sort it into a category, I think it makes it uh harder to grapple with and thus scarier to us. So like another thing, like I just thought of, or one of my games that I'm probably not going to make anymore, just because uh it's so far in the past, but like it was kind of like it's, have you ever heard or seen or played that game Clock Tower?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Was
so
that one by you?
no, it's like an early like I think it was like a PS1 game. It might have been a PC game too, but it's like a Japanese horror game where like it has an interesting perspective where it's like it's 2D, but at the same time it's like a 2D third person game where like you can, well, anyway, that's besides the point. It's a horror game. So I was gonna basically clone that. Right, I was gonna, it's like it's been done a couple times in different uh iterations of like indie games, and I was gonna make that like you're in the game in Clock Tower, you're being chased by this entity that is out to get you.
Mhm.
But at the same time, what I was gonna do was make it a pretty short game where it's like it can go for a bit, where you're being chased by this thing and you're hiding in different places. But then, once you finally get caught by it in my game, or this would have been the case anyway, it reveals to you that it's your it's that the thing has been chasing you, which is kind of like an alien, is like uh, or it looks like an alien anyway, like a pretty standard depiction of like a an alien, is like it
Mhm.
says like it explains to, it goes on, it goes into depth about it's how it's your father, how it's like your dad, and then it you come to terms with it, and then you sort of take off your human skin and go and fly off with him. um so it's like this, it's like, and obviously it telling you about it is like it's not great, but like um if like it's the same sort of thing where it's like indeterminacy, where you're like your natural like understanding of narrative and like what is good and bad, I think is like muddled, and at this, and I think that's like what like good horror does.
Is this is this have to do with that game that you were working on? Oh
uh
man.
which game?
Something about what you just described sounds very familiar to me.
Oh,
Were you working
maybe
on a game
I think I,
about fatherhood at some point? Because I feel like you were posting it
oh
on the
yeah,
Discord.
yeah, so that's like there's a lot of so what I find, yeah, so I am making a game about fatherhood right now.
Uh huh.
A lot of what I think,
Is this father turned me into the trees and rivers?
yeah, it's called My Father Turned Me into Trees and Rivers, yeah.
Uh
And
huh.
in that game, or just broadly, I think I'm really interested in family because family is like such a natural thing, and it's really like good grounds for horror because, again, it's like if you have some sort of like horror plot and like you like have different family dynamics in it, it's sort of, again, it creates that feeling of unease where you're like, well, this is really strange, like uh how, or it's not necessarily taboo, but it is, it's taking a hold of something that you think of as like super normal, and like the but at the same time like not not totally like, right, like a lot of people have like family trauma and stuff, so it's like
Uh
it's
huh.
not totally like unpsychologically or it's not totally like pure. But if
Mhm.
you like if you invert it in a strange or like interesting way with a horror plot, then like it just adds a lot more like uncanniness to what would normally be just like you're getting chased by a monster.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
yeah, it's just fatherhood and just parenthood. I think is very interesting to me in that way.
for sure, definitely. Okay, so trying to think if there's anything in the format we're missing out on. Uh, so we started this, I'll say at 7:15, so another 15 minutes yet maybe. Um, James, did you have any other good questions that you wanted to ask?
Um, yeah. So maybe it's a little far out, but do you have any plans for after you finish Discover Our Bodies? Do you have any other bigger games coming up, or think that maybe you can't talk about it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it kind of like depends on uh how positively Discover Our Bodies is received, right? Like, so like
Mhm.
I'm gonna try to make it a like a full game after I release the demo in any case. But
Mhm.
if it's like if people are like super enthusiastic about it, then that's kind of like gonna dictate how much time I put into certain things. I mean, I'm always gonna try to make the best I can, but like it's gonna determine a little bit the scope of what I want to do, and uh, yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
so. But at the same time, I do have other games that I want to make, um, and I would never like give up making multiple games for the sake of like making like one really big game.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Because I think I like smaller, like small to medium sized games in generally anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
But like
same.
yeah, um, and definitely like I I think I like making small games the best. From That's like what I've learned from my experience in like developing slightly larger games
Yeah.
is if I can make something that is small and very impactful at the same time, then like that feels good. And also it's less work too. Like
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
like I said, like I worked on a weekend, right? I made that game or Discover My Body, and like it did take a lot of time, and
It also did quite
like
well.
yeah, that's the thing. Like it didn't take me as much time as Discover Our Bodies is now taking me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm also trying to make Discover Our Bodies like just the demo like very special. It's gonna be
Yeah.
different. It's gonna be
So,
different in a way than Discover My Bodies, but it's gonna be sort of a similar feel.
mm-hmm. So I do have a question about that. How big are you thinking Discover My Bodies is going to be in the end? Are you pushing for a demo right now of Discover Our Bodies, and then you're going to make a full version after that?
Yeah, that's sort of what the plan is right now. I'm trying to
Because I know when we were talking about kind of featuring you on the podcast, we were thinking about maybe trying to sync that up with you releasing the demo, but you ended up seeing some delays for whatever reason.
yeah, so that was like if I think if I really like worked at the rate that I was going at when I was making Discover My Bodies, that would have been possible. But like,
Mm-hmm.
just for the sake of like
Sanity, mental
Yeah.
health.
my yeah, for the sake of sanity, I was like, okay, well maybe I should cool off a little bit. No,
Totally
I think
agree there.
it's turning out better than I would have if I had like forced everything, you know. So
Yeah, for sure. And then my follow up question to that is um, something that I think a lot of people should do that they don't is monetize their games. So I was wondering
Mhm.
if you were thinking about monetizing Discover My or Our Bodies,
that's a good idea.
because I absolutely think that you should charge at least a couple bucks for it. I absolutely think you should.
Oh yeah. If you put up on Steam and itch.io and Game Jolt,
I
that makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense.
I think that it would be a crime not to. It's up to you, of course. It's your game. You're making it. But
yeah.
and
That
then another thing, I remember I watched like a GDC talk about it a while back. And this guy was like, "Quit undercharging for your games. This work that you're doing is worth money. Don't charge people less than it's worth."
Mhm.
So I just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
I I okay. I'm of two minds about it because like as a person who makes games, yes, definitely. I want to be I want to make money, right? Like I want to, and like if I could, the dream is like to somehow fund myself where I can be making games full time, and
Me too, brother.
for yes, exactly, yeah, for everybody's dream is that, yeah, for like for a loving fan base who gives me lots of money and all that stuff. But that comes with its own pitfalls, I'm sure. But
Mm-hmm.
that, I'm also like, I think free games are very I don't know. There's something, almost all games that I like,
The ones
especially
you enjoy?
well, not necessarily the ones that I enjoy, but like a lot of the ones that I remember and like have like carried um like with me, like, and stuck with me, like a lot of them were like free projects or like things that I
Mm-hmm.
found on the internet. Um and yeah, so that and that rationally, that doesn't like, I'm sure there might be more games where like, I have paid for them and played them and enjoyed them and stuff, and they've stuck with me. But like, there's
Mm-hmm.
something very like, there's sort of like a sentimental appeal about a free game that you just like sort of download online off of a whim, on a whim,
Mm-hmm. For
Uh,
sure.
yeah. So like there. So again, I'm of two minds about it. But
Yeah, that makes
it's
sense.
possible. Yeah.
I mean, there's
If it,
other monetization models aside from just making people buy your game, like
yeah.
asking for a really low price and then encouraging people to give you more if they want,
Yeah.
or begging people to pay for it after they play the game, like on the credit screen, or
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
don't let us
encouraging
bully you into that
people.
either.
No. I
Um,
mean,
because I know that, like in my experience in making games, a few of them people have actually, without prompting them or anything, someone's just like, "Here, have $8 for your game," and I was like, "Seriously, dude? I made this in one night." It's like, wow. It doesn't happen very often, but it has happened a couple times um, on Itch, where I just release my games for free and then let people donate if they want. And I
what
always thought that was pretty cool.
what I'm probably gonna do is and like I'm sort of weighing my options, right? Like, but I think I am probably gonna do some sort of like Patreon
Uh huh.
uh for the development of the larger Discover Our Bodies game.
Oh, that's
And
smart.
Which is also a great idea, I think.
yeah, I thought about doing. I thought at first I was like all into Kickstarter, but like Kickstarter, it's not.
Yeah.
It's a very different set of like circumstances, and um, I also feel like because it was like I thought about Kickstarter at first because I was like, oh, there's all this enthusiasm and people are interested, and if I had had a Kickstarter campaign set up right then, ready to go, then
You
that
probably
probably
could have
would have
ran
been,
with it.
yeah. But at this point, I'm going for the slow burn. It's
Well, and I
the trigger
think
lever.
that having a patron with people with loyal patrons who give you money to keep doing what you're doing is probably in the long term a lot more valuable than not a patron, a Kickstarter would be.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, a Kickstarter is one and done, one project, and then you have to do it all over again and pray to God it works again. With a
yeah,
Patreon, you can just keep growing it, assuming you stick with it and people still like what you're doing.
yeah. Um, that the down, I guess, like the pitfall of that is, again, I like making all kinds of games, and like if I were to have a really successful Patreon for Discover Our Bodies, then I feel like I would be trapped in some way because I'd be like, wow,
Right.
people really like this. I better keep making it. I got to pay the bills, and at the same time, like people are saying
It
nice things
almost
to me.
like stops being a fun hobby and starts becoming a job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I totally get that.
I do like the idea of having a Patreon rather than charging for the game, so you can release it for free. But it's like, hey guys, if you like this game, here's a way to support it.
Well, I know one of the really unique monetization models that I'm a fan of. There's this game studio called Sock Pop Games, and
oh
what they
yeah,
do is they charge $3 for every one of their games, and they make them and they release them. They put them out for $3, and they're these kind of like small like demo, like small to medium sized kind of games. But they also have a Patreon, and you can give them $3 a month, and then you'll just get the games as they come out, and you get to have them all. And so
yeah.
like you
I'm
can kind of keep encouraging them to making games by joining their Patreon, or if you just want the occasional game from them, you can just pick it up on Itch. It's kind of like a two-tier kind of system.
Yeah, and when I first like I don't know. I've gone back and forth on so many different like things like because when I first released Discover My Bodies and I was like, this is what people and it started getting a lot of reception. I was like, cool, I'm gonna make another small cool game that people will like. And then it became apparent where it's like uh a lot of people were like, you need to make more of this. And I was hesitant at first. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
hesitant at first, but then at the same time I was like, I thought about it and I was like, well, there actually like there is something there. Like I could do a
Yeah.
lot more with it.
It
So
definitely seems like you have a pretty good opportunity with Discover My Body.
yeah, yeah.
I was curious. Do you have any? It doesn't have to be specific or even close. Just kind of ballpark numbers of how well it's done.
I can check if you
I'm
want me
just kind
to.
of curious. I don't know if you obsess over those kind of things or not, but because
Two
I
million
know
plays.
you were featured in a Markiplier video. I didn't find any. I didn't see any other like big YouTubers that played it, but I mean that alone was probably quite a big deal for the game.
Yeah, so uh oh wow. Okay. Well, yeah, that's another thing. No, no, no. So it has 5,792 downloads.
Wow,
Hey.
But, like that's the thing is like and
nothing
that's
to
another
complain
thing I
about.
learned. It's nothing to complain about, sure. Um I learned like compared to the people who watched the Markiplier video, it that is like sort of like a drop in the bucket.
Hmm.
Where and that might just be the reality now where it's like if it's a game that's like if people and like people like watching a let's player play or it's like a more of a narrative based game that might just be the future where it's like okay well a lot less people are going to be going through and playing it themselves at the same
Hmm.
time it is like more exposure so I don't know
Yeah,
um
I mean,
I
it was kind of unfortunate with Discover My Body because it really is just like a one and done kind of story. There's not a whole lot else to explore. I feel like if there was more facets to it, if there was more that Markiplier wasn't able to show, then people would be like, "Whoa, I really want to get in here and explore the rest of this and like pick it apart."
yeah I think that's true
So, I mean, it's almost like you have to design your game with YouTube in mind, unfortunately.
yeah but
Mhm.
at the same time I had no idea that it was going to be
As big as it
like
was.
I had I did make a joke to my friends when I made it. I was like, okay, now Markiplier can play it, and but then he did it like a couple days later, which was really weird.
How long
Um,
did it take for the Markiplier video after you released the game?
um, uh, I'm not sure. I feel like it was a week,
Uh
maybe
huh.
a little less than a week.
I
I know
think.
that the first person who kind of picked like there was some I think Vinny from Vine Sauce played it.
Uh
Uh,
huh.
uh, so in
It
like
kind of
part of like
was.
a oh go on.
As I remember when you released it, I think you posted it in the showcase channel, and I saw it, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool." And then like the next week, I remember watching it show up more and more on like the itch front page because you kind of went itch kind of like grabbed your project and held it up like and showed it to the masses. So I'm wondering if these content creators just kind of were scrolling around on like what was hot on itch and then just picked it up and were like, all right, let's run with this.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. And it definitely helps that it was like a short, strange game that probably does lend itself well to YouTube.
Oh, it's
Well,
super good for the
yeah.
perfect kind of game for the YouTube format.
Yeah. So and I'm not really sure about how the like the inner workings of itch. I don't think it's I mean, it's not showing up anymore on the front page, I don't think,
I
but
remember it
for a
was
time
yeah, it was smack dab on the front page for some period of time. I remember seeing it and going like, "Whoa, that guy's in
yeah.
Decade Jam."
Yeah. Um it's uh but yeah, like I also think Markiplier or he played I think it was in one of his collections of scary games. He played Lips Like Vellum. Uh I think it was like the second game that he played in the video. Um so that's like another I'm not sure how he found that. Like it might have just been that he was like, "Oh, this guy made that thing that I liked, so maybe." So hopefully he liked that one enough to, play some more of my games. But that brought on another wave of interest,
What
and
is it?
I've just
Robocop?
been again,
I
it's
haven't
like
muted.
it's I've been very fortunate that I
Well, I'm working on it.
that the small strange horror game lends itself well to YouTube, um, and that I personally like am interested in making those kinds of games.
Yeah, for sure. Well, all right. We did pass the 1 hour mark, I think. So I would like to give
Heck
everyone a
yeah.
chance to have any closing statements, any last questions, anything anyone would like to say. I think I'm pretty good. A lot of good discussion
Yeah,
today, I would
yeah.
say.
I thought it was fun. Thanks for having me on.
It was really nice getting to kind of talk about horror games because really I've never been I've always been interested in horror but like never involved in it. So it was cool to kind of get the perspective of that from someone else who wasn't super into horror, who was actually making horror games.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
someone did mention in the chat listener questions. We will take, I don't know, one or two. All right. So Svei said,
Ooh.
"What are your own emotions when coming up thinking of an horror story? Like in the process of thinking of it, do you get scared, chills, etc.?" Directed at you, Games.
Um, I it's more like I get the inclination that other people would think it was scary. For me, it's more like interesting or funny.
Uh huh.
Like, that's like again, like Discover My Bodies was like, I think the original like description for it was like body horror slash comedy.
Yep.
So,
I
um,
Which was a
so
really
love
good
that.
mix, I think.
yeah, yeah. So that, and where my ideas come from, they, I don't know. They just kind of happen.
They just kind of emerge from your brain or
Uh,
your fungal hive mind.
yeah, exactly. I think that's like the most honest answer most people can give about them,
Uh
unless
huh.
at least for me, like they do come like fully formed. I'm like, that'd be a good game idea. But at the same time, there's some iteration, like what I said, like Discover My Bodies was originally about aging, and then it became Fungal Hive Mind. Not sure how that happened, but it happened.
Mhm.
All right, and then our last question of the night. Um, it's from Obigre. I hope I pronounced that right. You said, when talking about art for Discover My Body, you said you always want to break rules. Which rules did you break specifically there?
Talking about, I'm sorry, yeah, if there can be a clarification, or maybe there can't. I don't know. But
There definitely can.
okay, are you talking about like specifically visual art, or are you talking about art as a whole?
He is typing.
Okay,
Visual
great.
art.
Visual art. Okay, so yeah, a lot of the what I did there was like, I wanted to make the and I'm at some point I will make a video about my process for making art. A lot of it, what I do is I use Ace Sprite, which is a spriting
It's a
pixel
great
art tool.
program.
It's a great program. It does everything.
It is
Um,
amazing. It even
yeah.
added pen sensitivity and stuff. It is. Anyways, continue. Sorry.
So it just does everything. Yeah. Anyway, um, what I a lot of what I was doing was trying to replicate that that low quality, like super highly compressed, super color indexed, like
Mhm.
drag a real life image into a graphics program and then have it show up, right? So it's just like
Yeah.
this really, like I think it's like they're just like really, if they're like games with like celebrities in them, when like made in like the 90s, would like
Mhm.
have like a really crunchy, really like low res picture of like Jackie Chan or something,
Uh huh.
and
Barely
I wanted to sort of,
recognizable.
I wanted
Yep.
to do something different. So what I did was like I used a lot of photo bashing for different body parts in Discover My Body, and then I photo bashed them, and then I drew on top of them and like all around them, and animated them. So
Mhm.
again, it's like it's technically well, maybe it's not even technically pixel art, but it's like it's using like this pixel art program for this very
Kind of
uh
unique niche kind of art style.
Yes, that works specifically well because it's like it looks like it's hard to look at. It's very grimy, but at the same time, it
Yeah.
works for what
Oh, it fits perfectly.
A little
program.
bit of a
Yeah,
offshoot question from that would be,
sure.
so how much of your artwork that's we'll use Discover My Body as an example. How much of it is procedurally done through code, and how much of it is directly put into GameMaker?
Um, Discover Our Bodies has a lot more procedural stuff. Like there's a lot more like programmatic art and like
Mm-hmm.
more shaders used. But for Discover My Body, a lot because it's so like simple. A lot of it
Yeah.
was just like made in a sprite and then
Sure.
slap on like a filter to make it, or excuse me, not a filter, a shader to make it look a little more grimy.
Mm-hmm. Because I think you shared like a glitch shader that you were using or something once.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
It really surprised me what kind of results you got from it. I was just curious as to how much of it was the shader and how much of it was your art.
It's kind of both, I would
Uh
think.
huh.
And like using for the sort of like low res look, the shader is. I mean, if I didn't have the shader, then I'd have to work a lot harder, I guess, on my on my
Mm-hmm.
like grimy low res art.
Kind of
It'd be
works
a lot.
to smooth it out almost.
Yeah, it'd be harder to pull off without the shader, definitely.
Okay. Cool. Well, I think we're going to close it out here. Thank you, everybody, for joining in and listening to the podcast. I'm not sure when we're going to do the next one of these. I think the goal right now is to do them at least once a month. Maybe I was thinking about introducing some new stuff to it, so I guess you'll hear about that next time. But the release schedule is probably going to end up being more along the lines of between every week and every month, somewhere in that area.
And thank you so much for being on, Yyames.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Yeah, it was fun to have you. I hope someday we can have you on again when you have a glowing, amazing, uh, with a nice bow on it version of Discover Our Bodies that we can proudly discuss
Yeah,
and talk about.
that'd be cool. And I'll
Or
have a
not.
theme ready for you too.
Or not. Maybe someday I'll make a different game and we'll talk about that instead. Either way, I'm more than happy to have you on.
Sure.
It was a pleasure, James.
Thanks so much.
Awesome.
All right, everybody, have a good night. I don't think I'm definitely not going to be hanging out in the open voice channel afterwards, but if either Yyames or James wants to hop in there, I know usually there's some discussion after these. Have a good night, everybody.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.